Welcome to our review of the PMBOK Guide 8th edition transition from the 6, 7 to the 8. What was gained and what was lost. I know lots of you have been in the world of project management for going to 8 years at least, some of you over a decade, and you've seen the transitions of the PMBOK guides. But it's important for us to assess what exactly was gained and what might have been lost through the transition. You might remember it started off with this journey, this big old book here called PMBOK Guide 6th edition. My 6th edition is pretty beaten up because I taught this to tons and tons of entities across the world. And then COVID hit, and then out came the 7th edition. And my 7th edition still looks as good as new, but not because I didn't travel. It's as good as new because very few organizations pivoted to it. So we have the PMBOK Guide 6th edition that has been in existence for quite a while. It's been alive. And even though the PMBOK Guide 7th edition came on the scene, there is a very important book that is still on the scene from PMI, and it's called Process Groups, A Practice Guide. Now, why is this book still relevant? It is very relevant because when the PMBOK Guide 7th edition came into existence, there was a lot of murmuring about its lack of process. It had principles which were good, and let's go down memory lane to take a look at these principles, because when it came to the principles, everyone was rather pleased, right? So we had these 12 principles that were introduced in PMBOK Guide 7. Not every one of these principles made it to PMBOK 8, by the way. And then in the 7th edition, what really threw everyone for a loop was the introduction of these things called project performance domains. And the question was, well, what about the process groups and what about the knowledge areas? And as a result of that, Process Groups, a Practice Guide was published to give people some guidance. But now, fast forward to PMBOK Guide 8th edition, there has been a transition from the 7th edition, which had no mention of the process groups to the degree that everyone was expecting, or the knowledge areas. There's been a transition to the PMBOK 8, which has new nomenclature yet again. And the purpose of this is to walk those of you who invested heavily in PMBOK 6 or Process Group, a Practice Guide, Process Groups, a Practice Guide, to make sense out of the changes. For those of you who have been on the journey for a while, you might be wondering, okay, so PMI have taken away a lot of the stuff that was here, and they have largely retreated back to a more familiar framework. But it's not as simple as that. There's a lot of minutia that I need to explain about how the processes have changed and how the knowledge areas are no longer called that, and how the process groups are no longer called that. And that's why today I am going to be presenting to you PMBOK 6 versus PMBOK 8. What was gained and what was lost. This is an end-to-end critique of PMI's restructuring and a clear guide for practitioners navigating the transition. So, the 10 knowledge areas that we had once upon a time in PMBOK Guide 6 to where we are now, we have these performance domains. Version 7 was scrapped, and it's a new world order. So let's take a look at the architecture side by side. When you take a look at both of these documents, PMBOK 6 gave us a precise modular system. PMBOK 7 pretty much abandoned it for 8 abstract performance domains. Now, PMBOK 8 then reversed course, reaching back to resurrect PMBOK 6 knowledge areas and process group structure. Only one PMBOK 7 domain survived, stakeholder. The resurrection was right, but the execution does have some flaws we are going to examine. So PMBOK Guide, sixth edition, we had the 10 knowledge areas of integration, scope, schedule, cost, quality, resources, communication, risk, procurement, and stakeholder. When PMBOK 7 came out, it had these things, which I won't even talk about. But PMBOK 8 has retained structure from the 6, or resurrected structure from the 6. But this is now the lay of the land. We have two processes in initiating still. We have five less in planning. We have two less in executing. We have two less in monitoring and controlling, and closing the same. So, what exactly changed? To understand what changed at a high level, we have a new name, governance, which is now called a performance domain, which used to be called knowledge areas, now called performance domains. And instead of just seven processes, we now have nine. So we have all of the original initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, controlling, and closing processes that were in integration now here in governance, with the addition of the quality area. For stakeholder management has now merged with communications management inside it. Scope, pretty much the same. Risk, pretty much the same, intact. With a few changes, we've merged the perform qualitative risk analysis and perform quantitative risk analysis. We'll take a look at that later. Risk, pretty much the same. Cost has been renamed to finance. Resources, pretty much the same. Schedule has become a lot thinner with only three processes. So, this is a deep dive, my friends. We have to go deep to really understand what exactly has happened. But at a high level, where I feel things were got wrong is the areas I'm going to address now. And these are not just stylistic preferences. Each of the following represents a substantive loss of precision, of clarity, or practical utility for working project managers. Let's zoom in real good to procurement. Procurement was removed. Based on training that I've done worldwide, this is indefensible. Procurement management is one of the most consequential responsibilities of a project manager. In many organizations, a significant portion of project delivery involves vendors, contracts, external suppliers, and third party service agreements. Removing it from the core standard signals a fundamental disconnect from real world project work. Procurement doesn't disappear because PMI removed it from the guide. PMs still need to manage RFPs and contracts and vendor performance and make or buy decisions on every major project. Project procurement management remains a critical piece of the project manager's life in planning procurement management, in conducting procurements, and in controlling procurements. And while PMI removed closed procurements from the PMBOK guide when it was the sixth edition, even the topic of closing procurements ensures formal completion of all contractual obligations legally and operationally. The elimination sends a signal that procurement is someone else's job. And to be quite honest, I see that as being dangerous in industries like construction, in IT, in defense, and in consulting. My recommendation is you in your organization, you might want to retain all four procurement processes from or all three. The fourth one that has didn't make it to the sixth edition, even that you want to be thinking about that as well. So regardless of your your exam structure, I would say definitely keep procurement front and center. Now, let's talk about communications and stakeholder management. They must not be merged. These are totally different topics and skill sets. Stakeholder management and communications management are related, but they're fundamentally distinct disciplines. Stakeholder management is about identifying, analyzing, and engaging the people who affect or are affected by the project. Communications management is about what information flows to whom and in what format and at what frequency. Combining them collapses two rich, nuanced areas into one crowded domain. is absolutely needless. You can communicate with someone without managing them as a stakeholder. You can identify and engage a stakeholder without a formal communications plan. These are not the same thing. Let's go into quality. Quality has been buried in governance, and it's a very dangerous downgrade to take three very robust processes: plan quality management, manage quality, and control quality, and distill them down to just manage quality and throw it away into governance. That is a very dangerous downgrade. Quality management has its own body of theory, of tools, and disciplines from Deming to Uren and Six Sigma and ISO standards and the work of Bill Smith and Michael Harry in Six Sigma. We can't even begin talking about that. Monumental, valuable work. Now, folding that into a governance focus area treats quality as an oversight function when it is, in fact, a delivery function. Quality assurance and quality control are active, ongoing processes that need accountability. They're integral to every phase of delivery, not a governance checkbox. Quality is not a governance concern, quality is a delivery concern. Confusing the two undermines the entire discipline. Let's talk about financial management versus cost management. Now, this is more than semantics. The shift from cost management to financial management is presented as a modernization of sorts, but it introduces scope confusion. You see, cost management is tactical and project specific: budgets, estimates, earned value, cost baselines. Financial management, that is strategic in nature and executive. And that's why in PMI's literature, you typically find this in program management and portfolio management. Now, not to say it doesn't all roll up to the top in some way, but I see this as being a little bit too much for the project management area. I feel it belongs somewhere else, even though it is related. ROI, business cases, portfolio investment decisions, capital allocation. Conflating the two pulls junior PMs out of their lane, and it doesn't serve program managers either. Cost management belongs to the project manager. Financial management, that belongs more to the program director or CFO. We're talking about the flow of money, cash flow, right, for the project to be run. Blurring this boundary doesn't serve either audience very well, in my opinion. Let's talk about the terminology overload that we're facing in this edition. The terminology overload, I'm sorry to do this to you, but I have to show you what exactly I'm talking about here. Okay. Now, take a look at PMBOK 8 matrix here, and take a look at PMBOK 6 matrix. Hundreds and thousands, if not millions, of project managers affiliated with PMI are familiar with the process groups: initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, and controlling, and closing, and the knowledge areas: integration, scope, schedule, cost, quality, resources, communication, risk, procurement, and stakeholder. But with the advent of the eighth edition, let me show you the difference here. We are taking away the language which call this process groups, and we're now calling them areas. Isn't that a bit confusing? Yes, it is. So calling these focus areas instead of process groups that we've been used to for over 2 decades is a disservice to the project managers who have been following this journey for so long. It is a needless change that didn't need to happen. Further confusing an already difficult topic. Now, taking a look at performance domains, we have governance, scope, schedule, finance, stakeholders, resources, risk, which were once upon a time pretty much referred to as knowledge areas. Now we're calling these domains. So let's go back to this image, my friends, to make sense, those of you who understand. We are calling these focus areas now, not process groups, focus areas. And now we are calling these knowledge areas performance domains. If this is not terminology overload, I don't know what is. Changing languages simultaneously, performance domains and focus areas. Wow. I don't know if there was a lot of consideration for the human mind, as well as stakeholders that already existed on previous editions. Using performance domains to describe both the five main groupings and potentially also focus area subcomponents creates immediate and foreseeable confusion. If candidates and practitioners cannot clearly distinguish between these structural labels, the framework fails its own purpose of clarity. This is not a trivial editorial issue. It will cause real confusion in classrooms, exams, and workplaces. It's already hard enough that PMI has exam domains, people, process, and business. And now we're using the term domains for what was the knowledge areas before, and focus areas for what was process groups before. And the term area was used for knowledge areas, which is no longer called knowledge areas, but is called performance domains. Extremely frustrating to the student, especially those who have been trying to pass the PMP exam for a while. I know the argument will be, well, the PMI in the exam doesn't really focus on the terminology of domains and focus areas. Well, why change it? If it ain't broke, don't try to fix it. Let's go to integration management. Integration management stands alone, but it shouldn't be isolated. So when we talk about integration management, let me show you real quickly what I'm talking about. So look at this. This is integration, right? This is what the project manager does. They are integrators. They combine, they unite, they coordinate, they simplify things by ensuring everything is talking to everything else. Now, with PMBOK 8, the language integration is removed and it now is called governance. Well, the PMI has defined governance as a framework within which authority is exercised. There's a difference between authority and integration. The language governance doesn't fit what exactly is being done at this level. I would have even been better off with governance being its own area of knowledge if you wanted to make it 11. But now we have crammed 9 different things in here. It didn't have to be this way. PMI have now added plan sourcing strategy and manage quality assurance. They've also changed a lot of the language. Monitor and control project work is now monitor and control project performance. Same thing. Assess and implement changes used to be perform integrated change control, which was brilliant. A lot of these changes, unfortunately, are semantic and needless and further pushes away the relevance of previously written PMI literature, such as process groups of practice guide. Now, what are we going to do with process groups of practice guide? Are we going to change this again? This was brilliant. It didn't need to change. Definitely not to the degree it has in the 8th edition. So when you take a look at these changes, you can't help but ask, what is the purpose? Now, this one right here, elicit and analyze requirements, was a very good call. The language is good. Elicit, definitely, instead of collect requirements. Over here, this has been so dumbed down that it takes a lot of what was in the forefront into the shadows in schedule management. It used to be plan schedule management, then we had define activities, sequence activities, estimate activity durations before getting to develop schedule. But now all that has been rolled into develop schedule. It takes it out of the limelight, dumbs it down, but in my mind loses a lot of value that schedulers need to know about and think about. And that's why the PMI's PMI SP exam is a brilliant exam to hold the schedule area up to the light. Because when you talk about project management, a lot of people immediately think, oh, time. You're the time guy, you're the time girl, you're keeping us on track. So to remove this again is quite sad. I feel it is a needless removal. They've taken away what used to be value. I know it lives underdeveloped schedule, but still out of sight is out of mind. Finance, I've already talked about this. It's pretty much taking away the language of cost and replacing it with finance, but finance has a much higher overarching concept, same as monitor and control finances. That is a more executive strategic language. Um, Definitely I would have kept it as it was. Stakeholders has been moved from the last knowledge area to this domain next in line. It still has everything that it had before, but now it's added the communications aspect, plan communications management. It's added manage communications and monitor communications. These all used to be in their own area, and rightfully so, because we talk about communication methods, communication models, sender receiver models. All that stuff was fine as it was. So the summary is, if in your organization you already had these as separate structures, you're not really gaining anything by changing it to the eighth edition. Same for resources, plan resource management, uh, estimate resources, a slight change in the name. Used to be estimate activity resources. Acquire resources, develop the team, and manage the team have been replaced with just lead the team. And that's okay. I won't get hung up on that, because development is really part of leadership, and management is not as good a term as leading. So that is a good call right there. Monitor and control resourcing, I'm fine with them putting in these terminologies, because we're talking about all manner of resources generally. So this makes sense to monitor and control how your resources are distributed and provided across the project. For risk management, again, we used to have a couple of risk analyses. We had perform qualitative risk analysis and perform quantitative risk analysis. And again, out of sight is out of mind. It's not just a simple risk analysis. I mean, that's dumbing it down. And, as the PMI, we might as well uphold the full gamut of project management. We're meant to be going forward, not backward. I see this as retrogression. I see this as dumbing it down. While it is very important to keep focused with the world of agile, taking away the bread and butter of the predictive project manager is doing them a disservice, because not everyone is using the concept of sprints and you know iterations on their projects. Some people are just hardcore into predictive. So while I appreciate the eighth edition resurrecting the concept from seventh edition about hybridization, we don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. So there are things I would have rather didn't change. Taking a look at PMBOK 6, you can see we have communications in its own lane. We have procurement in its own lane, which has now been totally removed. We now have stakeholder and communications being merged, and costs now being called finance. So you kind of get the idea. While I applaud the team in going back to the sixth structure, the changes are just a little bit needless, especially with the naming convention. That one is definitely one your company does not need to adopt. If you've been, especially those of you who I have trained, coached, and mentored in your firms about frameworks, and many of you now have the sixth edition as a framework. As you can see, you're not really gaining anything by changing the terminology. It's not worth it. That would be my honest opinion. Okay. If you got any questions as I'm going through this, just drop me a comment. If you got a different epiphany and you're seeing things differently, let me know. All right. So here we go. Integration management, now governance, right? It's been renamed and relocated. Scope management, pretty much the same. Schedule, pretty much the same. Cost now called financial management, named and elevated with executive financial strategy in mind. Quality management, now thrown into governance, axed as a knowledge area, or should we say a performance domain. Resource management, pretty much the same. Communications management has been merged. Risk management, pretty much the same. Procurement management has been removed. Stakeholder management, merged with communications. Now, when it comes to procurement management for the new PMP exam, the 2026 PMP exam, there's a task about managing procurement. So it's not as though PMI is not seeing it. You see, one of the problems is you have the people that write the exam domains and stuff, and then you have the people who are working on PMBOK. And I see the two not coming together, not matching. They could match a lot better so that, the overhead associated with going back and forth is reduced. So, what should practitioners do now? Well, the exam may change, but the work doesn't. So these are practical ideas for navigating this transition without losing the rigor and the discipline in the profession. Keep the procurement framework in your organization. Build and maintain your own procurement management approach. A lot of the firms that I've worked with, they have theirs, so just have yours, and it doesn't have to mirror what is in PMBOK 6, but the sensibilities of planning, executing, and controlling just makes sense. Okay? Don't wait for PMI to bring it back because, right now, PMBOK 8 has gone to where we were even before 2018. It's gone way back to when we had communication stakeholders merged and some other things. It's gone backwards. So don't wait for it to come back. I would also advise that you separate your quality management plan, your quality ideas from governance. In your project documentation, maintain a standalone quality management plan. Define your quality standards, quality audits, quality inspection, quality control, and all that. Make sure you keep that, intact. Just to give you a few stories about why I'm pretty firm on quality. I was training a firm out in Louisiana, ship, boat manufacturing company, vessel manufacturing company. And for the longest time, they had been blowing past planned quality management until I taught them and they realized this is why we are getting things wrong. All we're focused on is quality control, not even quality assurance. So, as a result of what was in this book, this company had an epiphany and were able to thoroughly improve their project management in the quality aspect. So, keep quality in the forefront. Run communications and stakeholder as parallel work streams, even if they're grouped in the PMBOK Guide 8th edition. I highly recommend you keep them separate in terms of plans, in terms of accountability, in terms of tracking. Also use process groups or practice guide if it still exists, right? If PMI keep this in the store, you might want to look at this book. The 6th edition is no longer in print, but process groups or practice guide, this is for the old faithfuls and those who truly understand the value of the work that people have done with PMI in previous editions. All right, it's important we don't throw out that value. All right, keep cost and financial thinking separate. Yes, they are related, but financial management, very strategic, cost management, more tactical, right? So apply the PMBOK 6 cost management processes for project level cost control and apply financial management thinking. I'm not saying the PM should not think about the higher level financial strategy. They should, but that's not their role. They should understand, right? They should think benefits and value, but they shouldn't be doing the work of the program or the portfolio manager. For exam candidates, I would say know both structures. PMI is notorious on their exams for retaining traditional language. It doesn't go away. And a lot of what has gone out of sight in the 8th edition is traditional language that has existed for a while. All right. I would say do not just look at PMBOK 8 to pass the exam. You need to go further than that. You also need to be looking at the PMP exam content outline. So that is even way outside of this discussion. I just finished writing the book with Roy Schilling on PMP exam immersion 2026, which is going to help people bring together the world of agile and the world of predictive, put them together, and to be able to see the holistic exam view, which is very different. Okay. That book is going to be in stores by June. But as far as those who just have the eighth edition and are trying to understand it, I would say you might want to look at Process Groups or Practice Guide because there's a lot of interconnectivity and flow that is not obvious. For organizations, I would say update your PM methodology. If your PM methodology is based on the sixth, do not abandon it without deliberate review. PMBOK 6 processes mapped to real organizational needs that PMBOK 8 does not explicitly serve. Remember, integration is your superpower. I know there have been some additions, but the core integration stuff is your superpower. This is a scorecard for PMBOK 8. Completeness of coverage, I'd give it a 52%. The terminology clarity is below 50. Agile and hybrid alignment is a lot higher. Well done on that one. Exam readiness, it's not a standalone tool for the exam in any way, shape, or form. Procurement coverage gets a 5%, very poor. Quality management, very poor. Principles based flexibility, not bad. I like the fact that there are principles in there, but what I do not like, going back to my critique, these were great. If there was one thing the seventh edition got right, was this. It was okay. It was good. I'm not gonna say it wasn't good. It was very good. This document in and of itself as a standalone, you know how much value this has added to teams worldwide? Now to take all of this away and to chop it down to just six, and let me show you which six we're talking about. So what happened was we now just have holistic view, focus on value, embed quality, be an accountable leader, build an empowered culture, and integrate sustainability. We just have six out of the 12. Why? Why cut it down so drastically? Everything here from the seventh was good. It was good. So things that should have been kept have been slashed, and things that shouldn't have been changed have been conflated. It's been a mishmash and a mix at some levels. Now, don't get me wrong, this is a very deep critical review. It's not to say that I'm not grateful that they brought back a lot of the stuff that was in here, but when you change stuff such that it becomes hard to follow the logic, we do need to be held accountable. So the verdict is this: the project management profession does not benefit from standards that eliminate proven frameworks in pursuit of conceptual elegance. PMBOK 8 improves on agility and principles, but it removes, merges, and buries disciplines that remain essential to delivering real projects in the real world. Procurement, quality, and communications, they're not optional. They are the work. What did PMBOK 8 get right? Better accommodation of agile and hybrid delivery. Uncertainty as a domain is a genuine improvement, but this is kind of going back to what was in the seventh that really didn't make its way in, even though the discussion about uncertainty is now more in the forefront. And as far as what must be supplemented, procurement, quality, dedicated communications plan separate from stakeholder, project level cost management, and integration. So the bottom line is this: PMBOK 8 is a starting point, it's not a complete system. Use it alongside the process groups, a practice guide. Retain your PMBOK 6 knowledge, particularly in procurement, quality, and communications. And never let a framework revision tell you that the essential project work has become optional. The work defines the standard, not the other way around. Thank you for joining me on this journey, this review. I hope it has added value to your understanding of the PMBOK Guide 8th edition. Again, we need to have dialogue in the community. You know, the problem that we've had over the years is a new PMBOK Guide comes out and it's, oh, this is a new way. And we just begin marching like people who have not experienced project management in the real world. No, we are all PMPs or project managers or practitioners, and we need to critique, we need to review, we need to debate, we need to put on the spirit of Ed DeBono's six thinking hats, right? To critically review things. And what went well is great, but what was not done also needs to be unearthed. And how can we improve if we don't critically analyze? Always critically analyze. Always look at project management through a different lens. I hope you enjoyed this review. Drop me a comment below. Let me know what you think. If you've been following the PMI's PMBOK guides for the past decade, maybe even two or even three, some of you have. I'm curious to know what you think about the 8th edition. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye for now.